Hello and welcome to the MSI show. So this is going to be a one-off show, which we're going to do about the MSI play-in phase, and then also do some predictions for the tournament as a whole. So as I said, this is just going to be a one-off, and we're going to be doing this from the perspective of the Oceanic scene for the first part of the show, so talking about the group stage. So we're looking to provide some insight onto Direwolves, and yeah. So joining us on the show today, I have my co-host, Nicholas General, as well as the legacy esports coach, Soulstrikes. So just for a bit of background on Soulstrikes, Soulstrikes is an ex-OPL player. He played in the Spring Split 2015 OPL Grand Finals for Direwolves. He played another split after that, coming back to help save Team Immunity from relegations in the summer of that year. And then after that, he decided to move on and become the coach for Legacy at the end of 2016. And I believe he's been coaching now for two splits, right?
Yeah.
So hopefully you'll be able to provide some insight into Direwolves, having coached and prepped against them. So the first topic that we're going to have today is going to be about Direwolves coming into the tournament. So I guess first thing which I want to talk about is, what did you guys think of Direwolves coming into this tournament? Because obviously they've been dominating Oceania for this split, but were you expecting them to do well internationally? I guess we'll start off with you, Sol.
I think they did. Going into that tournament, I expected them to quite nicely, and I thought they definitely had a chance to come first in their group stage. And if they play like they did in the finals and throughout the regular split, I definitely thought they could have taken the whole thing. Not the whole MSI, but the play-ins.
I figured. What about you, Nick?
Yeah, so for people who don't know, like all the other Oceanic representatives has always been Chiefs when it comes into these wildcard events. So Direwolves were the unseated Chiefs in a sense, and they came in. And I think when you compare Direwolves to Chiefs, Direwolves' like strength came from their individual play. Like if you look at the Direwolves roster, there's really no one that I thought wouldn't be able to stack up internationally. Whereas in Chiefs, there are a few question marks about a few of their players, notably Swiper. So I was pretty confident when it came to their individual play into the tournament, but it was really a question about how would they be able to transition their team play into the international scene.
Right. Yeah, I guess it was nice as well, even though Direwolves didn't do so well, to I guess see a different representative go over, and just see how they did. Because like you said, Chiefs have been over every single time, and they've never really had any international success at the Riot tournaments. Okay, so I guess talking about how both of you guys felt that they had players that could stack up internationally. Something which occurred before the event began is Direwolves were being very confident in interviews, saying that like they're not afraid of anybody but Korea, like they expect to win not only the play-in phase but do really well in the main event at MSI as well. Do you guys think that this was just like confidence from the Direwolves and saying we can do well, or do you think this was a bit of cockiness which perhaps negatively affected their play in the tournament? Sol. We'll go Sol, Nick, every time.
Yeah, sure. I feel like they just they don't know like their strength compared to other international teams. Like the only team they've really versed are like Oceania teams, and maybe they scrimmed some of the NA teams while they were in Korea, but they just don't know how they stack up against these winning teams from each region. So from their mind, sure, they won OPL, but like they just don't know how strong they are compared to the other team, which is confidence at the same time, but at the same time, it could come out to sound very cockiness for them.
Yeah.
Right.
To touch, like it does seem a very cocky considering none of them have any international experience, and they come into their first international event, and Schönfire was the main person saying this, but he said, like, I have no doubt in my mind we're going to come first in our group, and we can beat every other team besides SKT. If you're coming into your first international event, you're really not, sort of from a fan-wide perspective, you're not setting yourself up for success. I prefer the mindset of we're going to play our style and we're going to play to win and we're going to see what happens. Because if you think about it mentally, when Direwolves were losing these games, it's sort of I'm not close with the Direwolves players, but I'm not sure what if their mindsets were sort of similar to like, oh crap, we're losing these games. This isn't what we came in to do. We came in to dominate, and we're not dominating right now. This isn't going to plan. What's going on? But if they came in with the mindset of we're going to play our style, we're going to play out to win, and we're just going to see what happens, when they start losing games, or if they start losing some games, it sort of helps them with their mindset of, oh yeah, this is still part of the plan, more or less. You know, we're coming in to play our style, and we're going to try and play our style sort of no matter who we come across. So I didn't really like what they were saying, especially because none of them had any success internationally, and they came in from OPL, doing very well in OPL, but, you know, international event, it's a whole different event, and I think they should have came in with a little bit more respect. I don't know what their preparation was like. I do think their preparation was as good as it was going to be. I don't think it was any cockiness from them. I think it was just from a fan-wise perspective, it's not the best thing to do to come in with that much cockiness into an event.
Okay. All right. So I guess that kind of gives us a better idea about, you know, both the mindset of Direwolves coming into the tournament and how strong the team was relative to Oceania. So I guess we'll start off with the next topic, which will be the group phase. But we're going to be looking at the group phase from the Direwolves perspective. So we'll start off with the game one on day one. So Red Canids versus Direwolves. I'm assuming both of you guys watched this, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So yeah, I guess we'll start off with the pick ban. What did you guys think of the pick ban for this game?
I feel like Dove played to their strength. Like, it was very expected draft. I believe, Fentex played his
Ladder.
Yeah, his signature champ Vladimir and Dissindra. When we did verse him, he said as soon as we locked in Vladimir, we would win. Like, the draft wasn't bad. It's just there's nothing. I could see nothing wrong with the draft.
Yeah.
And
Right.
I don't fault them on like, oh, they lost because of their draft. Like, it's just they lost because of the the play. Like the macro perspective, like the Baron area. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, to touch on their draft, like, there are drafts that, like, favour a team, and the way that Direwolves like to play is they like to have shoving lanes, and they like to go in for these big 5v5 team fights, and that's sort of what they had with their comp. They had the Olaf top, which I think was the most strange pick from the Olaf. Like, they picked the Olaf as a counter pick to Jarvan, and obviously there's the interaction with Olaf that you can't flash out of the Cataclysm, so I thought that was a bit strange. I would have preferred to see a Renekton, or maybe even a Camille or something like that, but other than that, their draft was a very Direwolves-related draft. They had a Fantix champion, they had a more or less utility, safe bot lane, and they had Shenfire and a jungler that he could make some plays on, but when it came to their play, I think it was really a story of Dude on the Thresh. Like, Destiny got hooked under the tower very early on, he roamed mid, and what were good lanes before all of a sudden swung really poorly for Direwolves. And Direwolves domestically always won their lanes, and they'd always be pressuring, and it did seem like they were falling apart a little bit without having the pressuring lanes. Like, Shenfire had some crazy statistic of like 50% of the time is in an enemy jungle, and that's really facilitated by shoving lanes, by having winning lanes, and the fact that, mostly because of Dude hooking people on Thresh, like, their whole style of shoving in lanes, getting vision control in the enemy jungle, and forcing teamfights off of that really started falling apart. And, you can talk about internationally, like, have they played against a Thresh as good as Dude? Like, it's pretty clear that they hadn't, and they came in sort of unexpected and unexpectedly disrespectful versus Thresh, and it cost them a lot in that game.
Yeah.
Do you think that's oh, sorry.
Yeah, and I'd like to touch on, like, I believe only Sin Gaming plays Thresh, and no one in OS plays Jinx. So it was just very unfamiliar territory for Delves to verse a Jinx Thresh lane. Yeah?
Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, that's actually what I was about to ask. Is I was like, was that kind of a byproduct of the Oceanic meta not being like not having those champions in it, making it quite difficult? Yeah, they did seem to have a very they seem to be very disrespectful to the Thresh hooks, but I guess that could have been, like you said, a product of that. Okay. So in terms of why Direwolves lost this game as a whole, you mentioned like the Baron. Like, did you like for me watching this game, they did seem to fall incredibly far behind just from getting caught out in laning phase, hooks, things like that. So do you think that the Baron throw is like the biggest area which they lost in, or do you think that the game was probably looking mostly over before that stage even hit?
Well, if we go back to touch on what Nick said about the Thresh, like everything kind of started off when Destiny died to the Thresh, and then Ivan gave blue buff to Syndra, then they 2v1 Vladimir in the mid lane, and I think that was like the starting point of where Red Canids actually got the pace of the game. Like they took the mid tower, then they had Ivan and Thresh roaming together with Syndra, then they went bot, then all these things happened whereas top Chippy was pushing in Jarvan, but actually not resulting in any kills, so nothing was happening at top. Yeah, I just think early game wise, Delves took a hit, and Red Canids played really well, and yeah, so like that's the first half of it. I think Red Canids just played really well with their composition, playing with Syndra, because Fantex was, I believe, like 15 CS ahead of the Syndra before the blue buff was given. So Fantex was playing extremely well, and Shenfire, in my eyes, was playing the matchup, the Gragas versus Ivan, really, really well until the point the mid tower went down. So Shenfire was playing really well. So it's just that Thresh getting a hook and Syndra getting the blue buff twice. I believe they stole their blue buff in their jungle.
Yeah.
And yeah, the Syndra just had just infinite amount of mana and just got back into the game and impacted the map a lot quicker than Vladimir could offer.
Right. Okay. Okay, so I guess we'll move on to the next game. So if I remember correctly, this was Supermassive versus Direwolves. So something which I noticed in the pick ban, which appeared a bit in Korea as well, was when one team was banning away Ashe, and then the other team forced to ban away the Varus, and then the first team picking up the Caitlyn strategy. So for starters, how good do you think that this pick ban strategy coming out from Supermassive was, and do you think that the answer from Direwolves was good picking up the Ezreal Lulu? Because that did seem to be quite a big point of pressure for Supermassive in the game. Yeah.
Yeah, so like banning the Ashe and the other team banning the Varus, just taking away the utility AD carries, and which just means because both Varus and Ashe does relatively fine, especially Ashe against Caitlyn. So taking away those two picks just means Caitlyn's tier is gonna go up extremely high. And if that does happen, you need to either ban Karma or Lulu, because Caitlyn with Karma Lulu, either one of them is extremely strong. So if Karma is with Caitlyn, which means they have push priority, whereas if they have Caitlyn and Lulu, they're gonna have like poke, and they're just gonna chunk the enemy ADC out. So coming into the last ban was Shen. I think they should have banned Karma or Lulu instead of the Shen ban.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, if Direwolves took like Ezreal Karma or Ezreal Lulu against like Caitlyn Nami, Direwolves bot lane had much better laning phase, in my opinion.
Yeah, because that bot tower fell very quickly. It fell like 9 minutes into that game, and when you have when you come to like bot lane matchups, like Karma versus Lulu is Karma favored, and like Direwolves picked up the Lulu. Caitlyn versus Ezreal is very Caitlyn favored, and they've got really no real gank assistance with the Ezreal Lulu. So all that Supermassive need to do was just push in the tower, and then just keep hitting it. and just keep hitting it, and it's going to fall very quickly into that game. So I agree with Sol, like, you should be looking towards getting the... Because what happened was they got a priority support and a priority ADC. By banning out one of the supports, you force them to either first pick a priority ADC or first pick a priority support. And if you do that, they have to choose which one, and then the bot lane matchup is relatively even. I think that game was very sort of... It actually reminded me of like a Chiefs game back when they had Radia. Like, Radia and Ejim would just, like, win the 2v2 and just walk around the map killing all the towers, and then all of a sudden Chiefs would have, like, a 5k gold lead at 20 minutes, and you'd be like, well, there's not much we can really do. Daiwas, they had the Azir counter pick into the Orianna, and they should have probably looked towards scaling with the Azir and the Ezreal, but they had a few, like, Fantix winning for the 1v1 on Orianna, lost, and then, King died randomly. But something else that coming through in this game where I thought that Supermassive wasn't a particularly good team was they started the Baron and they let Schönfire waltz in and go for a free smite, and Storm didn't even have smite. Something that like really pisses me off about teams is when they're like 5k gold lead, and then they just start the Baron and they let the enemy jungler waltz in and just have a free shot at winning the game. That really bugs me, and the fact that Supermassive did that without Storm even having smite was just like the most bizarre like feat of shot calling that like I've seen in a while, and it's just very bad play from Supermassive. But they had, because of the draft, they had such a strong bot lane matchup that they could just start rotating around the map and killing all the towers. So up until that point of the Baron, I thought they played a really well, a really strong game around the Caitlyn Karma pressure.
Yeah, like, they played through their win condition, and yeah, the Baron call was a bit odd. Like, if we go back to KT versus SKT game 1, like, as soon as, even though Baron was like on 2k health, KT just backed off. Like, some people argue like, hey, why didn't you just finish it? But like Nick said, why risk for 5k gold lead and go for the 50-50 win when you could make it like 80-20 win when you just siege and play to your win condition? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that strategy did seem to do really well into the Dials that game. So, see, personally for me, I think that this game was a pretty big drop flaw from Dials, because, you know, like Saul said, or was it Nick mentioned earlier, like we have seen a similar draft coming out in Korea from KT. So I personally thought this was quite a big drop flaw by allowing the horrible bot lane matchup to happen, because I mean, Supermassive, all they really had to do was just shove in that wave, take tower, and just rotate. Like, it wasn't a particularly hard game for them to play.
Protect the Caitlyn comp, and they let Caitlyn, like, they protect the Caitlyn with the shields and a good front line, and they just let the Caitlyn have like the freest matchup in the world, and Supermassive's best player is Zeebnot. So it's like, Zeebnot got exactly what they wanted. Zeebnot got a very strong comp, and it's just like, it was poor drafting from Direwolves, to be honest. There's not much else to say other than that.
Yeah, they kind of sacked their bot lane too much. Like, Ezreal, Lulu versus Caitlyn Karma, like, very Caitlyn Karma favored. But on the other side of the map, like mid, Azir versus Orianna, Azir is usually picked into like a control mage counter, and Fizz does relatively well into Nolus. So what Direwolves really wanted was the bot lane survives for like relatively like 10-minute or 15-minute, then the tower falls down. But on the other side of the map, Azir and Fizz is going to get the push priority, go to the top jungle, and try get return tower kill, right? Yeah. But what ended up happening was they lost the tower in 9 minutes. So like the strength of Direwolves' comp didn't really come online because the bot tower just went down, then Caitlyn just rotated on the other side of the map. Then it just disturbed the whole the flow of the Direwolves gameplay.
Right. So it just went down too fast.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next one we have, so we'll move on to the next game. So Direwolves versus Rampage. So for us Oceanic fans, we finally get to talk about a Direwolves win. So yeah, I feel like I'm shitting them a little bit hard, but I do feel like the draft was poor in this game from Direwolves again. I think picking the Talon into Lulu is really rough. Obviously, Polymorph very good into the melee champions that have to come in, as well as like having the Shen into the composition as well. So I thought this draft was really poor from Direwolves again, but they were able to pick up the win. Yeah, what did you guys think of this game? We'll start with you, Sol, and the draft as well, I suppose.
Yeah, so starting from draft, like Dolphs, I was quite surprised how priority they put on Ivan. I thought Shenfire would favor like Graves, Lee Sin, Elise, Kha'Zix more so than Ivan, but I believe he picked it up through us maybe. So the first pick on Ivan was it showed that Shenfire can play Ivan, so yeah, it's a very strong pickup. But the difference between last game and this game is they had Ezreal Karma. So what Karma can do against Lulu Caitlyn is like Karma can like Mantricue and so what Caitlyn wants to do is she wants to push the lane, but Karma kind of counteracts that. She can Q the wave and trim the wave down, and which means less time for Caitlyn to hit the tower. So Ezreal Karma is a lot better than Ezreal Lulu in a sense when you're versing a Caitlyn. So the bottom side of the map draft we're fine, but if we go down, it's Lee Sin, Syndra, and Shen. So they have a very, very strong top half of the map. And whereas Direwolves, it's Talon, Ivan, and Gragas. Whereas Ivan wants to team fight, but Talon wants to push, go onto the side. So it kind of, the Talon and Ivan kind of don't complement each other. Whereas Lee Sin, Syndra, you just press up and someone's going to die at level 6. Yeah?
Yeah.
So, and Talon wants to burst someone down and assassinate someone, but Shen's there to cover that person. So the top part of the map, Dolph's drafting was definitely a bit of a question mark.
Yeah. It was like a Jugglemore Talon comp into a Lulu. And a Shen. So what I thought was going to happen with this draft was that they'd put all the eggs into the Talon basket, and then Talon would jump into the team fight, get polymorphed, and the Shen would come on whoever he assassinated, and then they just play like a front-to-back team fight. Rampage would, and they just win the game. But what happened in that game was Lee Sin got a few ganks off, like he got level 4 onto the Talon, and that touches upon what Sol was saying with the Syndra and Lee Sin. There's very, very strong gank assistance with the Syndra stun and the upfront burst from both members. And then they also comboed that gank later on into a Lee Sin and Shen gank into the bottom lane. But what happened for Direwolves was that they won 2 isolated 2v2s 15 minutes in, and Chippies was like winning top by like 30 or 40 CS. And this like comes back to Direwolves domestically. They had some of the strongest players in their roles in each position, and that sort of shows that individually Direwolves could stack up. Rampage was one of the weaker teams in the group, so there's something to say about that. But they were losing the game through like Lee Sin ganking people, but they just won 2 isolated 2v2s 15 minutes in, and then they did something a bit interesting with the Talon pick. Like, you traditionally think of Talon as a champion that, you know, uses his mobility to roam, to create picks, create skirmishes, that sort of stuff. But what they did with the Talon was they just shoved in the side wave, and then Talon has very good wave clear and a good mobility, and they just all run mid, and then they just dive someone with their Gragas. It was like, it's a very strange comp from Direwolves, and I don't really see anyone else playing it, and it worked for them because of the 2v2s they got off in 15 minutes in. But I feel like if they weren't better players than Rampage individually, they should have lost that game pretty easily. Because their comp really doesn't actually make that much sense stylistically. Like, as Sol said, Ivan, team fighter, more passive, Talon, really aggressive, skirmish-based split push champion. But Direwolves made it work with their strong individual skill.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, if only there was a world where we could see Direwolves run this exact comp against a against a better team. Anyways, so we'll move on to the next game Direwolves played. So we're moving on to the second day which they played. And, actually, yeah, sorry, Direwolves played pretty much the same composition, right?
They did.
First K Dame 3
Yeah, they
against
did.
Supermassive. And how did that go? So I personally feel like a lot of the things which Nick mentioned about the composition kind of came to, like, the problems kind of came out in this game. Like they tried to group up as 5 with this composition with the talent into the Lulu, and I really felt like they just got destroyed in the 5v5s, right?
Yeah.
Would you share that opinion?
Yeah. So I think this game, the difference between this game and Dials versus Rampage was Dials had 2-0 Talon. So Talon was very, very fed. What Fantix could have done was he could have, instead of trying to roam bot, and he should have just ran top, because Norlis versus Gragas, Norlis has to build 2 Dorans and 2 Doran rings and no magic mantle and into Spectral Cow. So which means Talon has all these armor pen items, and he can just assassinate Norlis, which means the top part of the map is going to open up. But what ended up happening was Ezreal bought a Vamp Scepter on his first back, which means he's going to be fine against Caitlyn Lulu. Like, he's just going to lifesteal Caitlyn's poke. But instead of taking damage and for you to trade your... Instead of trading your health for CS, he was trading his mana for CS. So what ended up happening was Ezreal ran which meant Schönfire had to come bot, and he had to... There was this weird 3v3 extended laning phase, as you guys remember. Yeah, and like, hey, we want a base, but Caitlyn Lulu at least is like, no, you're not basing. Then we're gonna put 3 people bot. Then this happened for like good 5 to 7 minutes, and the lead that Fantix had, where the opportunity that he could dive top, it just disappeared, because like LeBlanc gets her arm guard, now Norlis gets his ninja tabby. So there was an opportunity for Direwolves to make a real proactive play, but it just got delayed because the bot lane needed to reset. But really, the Direwolves should have just, hey, let's just leave our bot lane alone and just go for a dive top. Then after that, the Caitlyn Lulu got the first blood tower. They went mid. Then then there was a lot of fights going on. Then Supermassive just came out ahead.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. I thought that they were looking for that team fight on the bottom side, but that's some really good insight. Yeah. Sorry. What do you think, Nick?
Yeah. So when you look at that, like, comp 5v5 wise, you've got Nautilus coming in. You've got the Caitlyn Lulu coming in. Like, a very strong front to back comp from Supermassive. And from, as we touched on before with Direwolves, like, they've got this talent pick that's not too great in the team fights. And we saw in this game, like, even though Talon was very far ahead, as Sol said, I think what their mindset was is like, Talon roams bot and relieves the pressure in the bot lane, and they just sort of overlooked roaming towards top entirely. But in the team fights, what you saw happen was that Chippy's like botched a few engages, like he just straight up whiffed his body slam onto Zeednot, and then they like got a favorable front to back fight. And when you think about Direwolves comp, they need to execute the team fights really, really well with like a comp that doesn't have the greatest engage. Like, their entire engage is just Gragas E-Flash, ult the Caitlyn in, they one-shot that person, and they go from there. If that team fight doesn't happen, but in that way, what's just going to happen is that they're not going to be able to touch the Caitlyn at all. And you saw that in the team fights, like, Chippy's whiffed the engages, then they all went in trying to, making sure they're in a position, and they just get kited by the Caitlyn. Fantix even ran cleanse in this game to avoid the polymorph, but despite that, like, he just goes in, gets polymorph to use cleanse, and then they just like use the shields on Caitlyn, and then he just can't one-shot that person, and then he just walks away, and then Caitlyn just keeps hitting him, and then like Supermassive just keep running down 5-man around everywhere, hitting the tower, setting up the trap lines, and Direwolves actually can't engage on them, and they just sort of like lose the game from that. It was as you know, Scott said, like this is what sort of what happened with that comp. It's like a low engage comp into a comp that likes to 5v5 and likes to siege, and you've got poor engage, and you saw what happens when you can't, you know, beat them so much individually, and you can't actually execute the very specific team fight conditions you need to have.
Right. Okay. So I guess we'll move on to the second to last game for the Direwolves. This is the last time as an Oceanic fan we'd be happy in this tournament. So Direwolves taking the game from the Red Candids, which I believe this game actually knocks them out of contention for first place, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They were
Yeah,
playing spoiler
so-
in this game. Direwolves had like no pressure in this game.
At least we achieved something, right? Okay, so yeah, so this Direwolves game, if I remember correctly, this one went really poor at the start, right?
really
and-
poorly.
Then they sort of brought it back and made that incredible Rise play at the end.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess like watching this game from my perspective, I really didn't have a whole idea on why a lot of the things were happening. I just felt like the Red Candidates were like getting a lot of things done early, then there'd just be like random picks and fights in the Direwolves. Like what did you guys make any sense of this game? Like what did you guys think of this game?
So like Red Canids got their LeBlanc really ahead, and the Fiora they at least had a few ganks. So that was all good and all, but what ended up happening was at least had like 7 CS compared to the Shenfire's like 31 CS. So like sure, Dolphs are behind in kills, but sometimes you just gotta look at the especially the junglers, you gotta look at how many camps they take and the level, because at one point Shenfire was like level 7 compared to Elise's level 5. So I think the big turning point was when Elise was trying to gank Chippies and Shenfire was in the bush ready to counter gank, and he killed both Elise and Fiora, and that was just a huge turning point because that's when they got the first blood tower, and and Chippies came back through the game, and like then the whole lead that Rand Cannons had just disappeared because like now Fiora can't 1v1 this Fizz. Elise can't. If Elise ganks and gets counter ganked by Graves, she's just going to get blown up. And Caitlyn Lulu, they didn't take the tower in 9 minutes. The Ezreal Karma's doing relatively fine. So the game went real sour for when Red Canids had a massive lead. So it was just a poor execution of them and not playing through their win condition.
I think
Right.
When it comes to this game, I haven't been talking about the individual performances of Direwolves too much, but I think Shenfire showed in this tournament that he is like a legitimately international level jungler. Like in the other games he was constantly getting XP advantages over the enemy jungler. He was getting a lot of good ganks off. Like in the previous game we were talking about Fantix having 2 kills. That was off the back of Shenfire. This game, like the game was going very, very poorly, like just Chippies being very stupid in the 1v1. But Shenfire brought it back. Like Shenfire had the favorable jungle matchup with the Graves into Elise, and he just destroyed Napon in the jungle matchup. Like even though Napon got what he needed to done in the ganks, like he sacrificed so much of his farm that, as Sol said, like he was Shen was actually like level 8 for a brief period of time when when Napon was level 5, and that's just like absolutely ridiculous as a Graves. Like if ever Graves walked into Elise, he would just have to like run away, else Shenfire would just kill him. Something else was that the last time that that DW played versus Red Candids was Diode was on the Thresh, and this game he's on the Lulu, and he finished the game 0-7-1. Like what he was, it sort of reminded me that he thought he was playing Thresh, so he's like running up and trying to like get picks off, and he's like playing Lulu, and then DW just kill him. And that it's a bit disheartening, I guess, from the Red Candids. Like Dude was playing really well on the Thresh, he picks the Lulu, and he just keeps playing with the mindset of Thresh, and that's not how you play the Lulu. But when it came into like the mid and late game, like Fiora got the necessary items that she needed to be able to split push, and then Red Candids played like this like awesome guerrilla like style split push 1-3-1, and like Robo just kept suiciding in the side lane, and then it was a very sort of crazy game from Red Candids, and it was sort of what they needed to do. Like DW could have very easily controlled the game with the strong 4-man, but they just like split DW across the map, and we talked about this before on the show. Like DW individually have the players what it needs to take to be able to play internationally. Like Schoenfly had a very good game. Jippy's, although a bad start, he had a very good mid and late game. But when it came to the actual macro decision, it looked like DW were getting very flustered when it came to the Furo split push, and they were like bleeding objectives left, right, and center when they were very far ahead. And also there was the Barons in this game.
That's what I was going to mention next.
Damn, like Red Candids did it. Who was it? Supermassive did it to Dials, where they just let the enemy, where they let Shern walk in and then get a free smite off. DW did the exact same thing with Napon twice. Like, it's very simple what they need to do. They just need to drop a ward over to see the Elise, and when the Elise, like, Napon was making like a straight beeline for that Baron. If they just drop a ward over, see Elise like walking over, kill the Elise because he's like has no gold, and they just go back to the Baron. They were so far ahead, but instead they just sort of like, alright, Shenfire, just hit the smite, mate. And they just like they tried to like win the game off micro, like outsmiting rather than let's just drop a ward over and like use our brains for a little bit. And then the second Baron, I watched this a few times, at least repelled over at 4k to 3.5k HP, and I was just kept hitting the Baron. You know, like the correct move to make in that position is just to let at least drop down and then kill him when he comes back down. But they just let Elise repel up, get it low enough that Elise on the very last second of the repel can jump into the Baron and get a smite off, and it was just like, very poor play from Direwolves in the mid game. Like it was very clear they were getting flustered with the Furo split push, but they did actually win the game, and they just won the game through brute forcing. They just decided to, alright, screw you Red Candids with your split push. We're just gonna run 5 down mid. And you saw they got the mid inhib and they Rise ulted out. They did the Baron, and Schoenfire, I think he had a very, very strong tournament. And it's sort of encapsulated in this one play where he gets the like very strong Elder Dragon. Like I think they have 4 dragons and a few Infernals, and he just Q flashes over the wall, R's, auto attacks, and gets a crit onto BRTT, and just one shots to Caitlyn, and he just sacrifices himself for the kill on Caitlyn, which is like a very heads-up play, and something that not necessarily a lot of players do. Like, not many players are willing to just sacrifice themselves to start off a fight like that, but he did it, and he got the one shot off on Caitlyn, and they won the game off the back of that.
That Rice play was insane, because I remember I was watching with my friend, and I'm like, oh no, Dials are cut off, what are they going to do? What are they going to do? There's going to be a big fight, and I'm like, that's going to decide the game. And then they just like hop out, and I'm like, oh.
Yeah.
Oh, that happened. Yeah, Sol, do you have anything else you want to say about that game, or move on to the next one?
Not really. Like Nick said, Diode played a pretty poor game. He finished 0-7-1, so maybe if he like Diode definitely could have played better, but like yeah, it just seemed uncomfortable on the Lulu. Like the Lulu didn't really do what Lulu could have done, and I actually think Destiny and King played really well in that game, particularly. Like holding off, not losing the tower. So yeah.
Okay. So the final game. So Rampage, who were 0-5 in the group at this point, playing against Direwolves. Rampage picks up this win. Now, for me watching this game, similarly to I guess the Thresh issue that Direwolves was facing, where they were just getting caught everywhere. Like the Ahri was just so many people getting hit by charms, like left, right, and center. Yeah. So many people getting caught out, and they just snowballed the crap out of the game. Like, is there anything other than that, like you guys would say about the game against Rampage?
So Dolls finally managed to get their Varus in their last game, which didn't really matter. But so it was Varus Karma versus Lucian Lulu, and the surprising factor was the Rampage's bot lane actually won their lane. So like I think Dara and Yutori Moyashi played that lane extremely well. So big props to them, and that actually like Lucian winning that lane is like Lucian's a very strong mid game, so him getting a really good early game just made Tussle's like an early game a lot more easier. So which means he could put less resource onto bot and use their bot lane priority to come down mid and shut down Fantix, which they did, and their mid laner, the Ari, like landed amazing charms and just get a lot of picks off on Darwolves. So yeah, this game was a lot of random skirmishes, and as you can see, like top half of the map for Darwolves, Fizz and the Kazakhs, you want to play these skirmish, but on the bottom side of the map, the Orianna, the Varus, the Karma, you don't really want to skirmish. You just want to just hold off till mid game, hit your 2-item power spike, then go for a fight. But yeah, it's just the Ari just keep hitting the charm and just snowball the game. And yeah, and Rampage played really well considering they were 0-5 and there was nothing on the line. And yeah, so very well played by Rampage.
Yeah, this game was more or less decided in skirmishes and like individual play, and there was like one play in particular that sort of like summed up the game for me. Was like there was a skirmish in DW's Raptors, and then like Chippies dies from a result in it, and then Dire was like lose a member there, and they like immediately pan down to King and Destiny, and then they try and 2v2 and Ari and Graves, and the Ari was like already a bit ahead, the Graves was already ahead, and then it looked like King and Destiny were just like trying to outplay them 2v2 and dodge skill shots, and King like dodged a fair amount of the skill shots, but it was just like Graves and Ari at that point of the game just gonna like completely destroy Varus. I think the only person that really played too well that game was like Schönfire. He got Chippies some advantages, and then Chippies snowballed that onto the Galio, but like Fantix in particular, like that was probably like one of the worst games we've seen from Fantix in a really long time from a player that has very consistent performances. And it's like just a disappointing like last game from Direwolves, like finishing the group with only 2 wins.
Okay. Yeah, no, I was quite disappointed. I had really high hopes of this Direwolves squad, but personally, I felt that they did a lot to harm their chances at success. Like I thought that the pick bans and things which they did were really like they put themselves in a lot of situations where their bot lane was going to be suffering, or like their compositions to me like didn't really make a lot of sense, which is kind of disappointing to see because I felt like they could have done a lot better. Like, would you guys agree with that sentiment? Like, do you think Direwolves underperformed at this tournament?
They definitely could have done a lot better, and the games we saw, like some of them were relatively close, and like it definitely felt like Direwolves weren't like the worst team in the group. Like I believe they could even go second, but they just need a bit more international experience, a bit more time, and I believe coming up to next OPL split, hopefully they can bring Oceania more, scrim Direwolves, and as a whole, the scene just gets better.
Okay, and Nick, same for you.
Yeah, I think the big thing that coming in from that game was that like Schönfire is I think he was probably the best jungler in that group. He played really well like the entire time, and every single time that it was like DW's in shambles, like Schönfire comes up huge. Like even in game 1 from against Red Candidates, like DW is losing around the map and he makes a few good engages on the Gragas. This game he's playing Kha'Zix and he makes a few good picks, and the other 2 games like he got his laners advantages. It was just like I think that DW weren't ready for how like they play a very greedy style in OS. Like they push in all 3 of their lanes. They play aggressively, and I don't think they weren't used to playing against teams that could match them as much individually. And so a lot of their problems in a team when it came to their greed, especially in the laning phase, were abused. Like Fantix died a lot to jungle ganks in this tournament, and I think it was a lot because not too many junglers in Oceania have as creative pathing or as willing to sacrifice the individual like resources in the game as much as the international teams were. Like Napon on the Elise, like he was level 3, and the first thing he does when he's level 3, like he just makes a straight up beeline to mid lane. And then he ganks Fantix and he kills Fantix. Like, not many Oceanic junglers play like that sort of very aggressive, very risky, very gank heavy style. And I don't think Dials were quite ready for that internationally. So if they qualify for next Worlds, I think they need to review like their games more closely when it comes to playing an OS and actually figure out not like what actually happened, but what could have happened and what are their flaws coming into the game, into the international events. Because, you know, coming in from Schönfire's comments, they were very confident and for good reason, but their greed and their flaws in their play were were exploited in a lot of the games.
Alrighty. Okay, so I guess we'll move on to the next topic. So in terms of the rest of the group phases beyond Direwolf, so we're just going to talk about the winners in relation to the two series. So the first series we had was TSM versus the Marines. So I guess we'll talk about a little bit about the Marines in the group phase, right? Like they seem to absolutely destroy their group, right?
Week 2, the second round, they destroyed both games 1 and 2. However, in the other games that they played, they did something. They won a lot of their games off just starting these risky barons, and then they win the smite and they win the game from there. But when Marines, like their players to watch were definitely Levi. Like he is a very, very aggressive jungler, like to a fault. He forces a lot of stuff early, he gets a lot of kills, he gets a lot of deaths. And then Optimus was also very strong, and then the other players weren't as much to worry about, but those two, that mid and jungle from Marines was like very interesting to watch, and they were a very aggressive team. And when you think about a wildcard team, like they against a more like against TSM or against one of the major regions, like the style that you really want to be able to play is a very aggressive style, and you sort of, it sounds bad, but you devolve them down to your level and you make the game about skirmishing and fighting, because theoretically when it comes to the macro play, you're going to be at a disadvantage. And that's the way that Marines just naturally played. So I thought it did give them a good matchup into like the TSM.
Yeah, definitely. Like, yeah. I believe TSM did play quite poorly, but I believe Marine played extremely well. They skirmish around their mid-end jungle synergy extremely well, and Svenskeren and Bjergsen didn't really quite show and didn't know how to deal with the whole 2v2 skirmish that was bringing from the Marines. So yeah, it was very interesting to see how the Marines play it out. So they play it out in the jungle first, and they push that advantage through mid. Then they bring their jungle and mid laner down to bot, and the bot just explodes. Like they go for this crazy 4v2 dive, and the game just snowballs from there. Whereas top lane, you just get the top laner to pick like Gragas and just wave clear, wave clear, wave clear, and just hold it out. And yeah, and they really favor the Gragas, which is very strange, but the playstyle they do play kind of like complements the Gragas. Like the Gragas has good sustain, good wave clear, and so he can escape from the ganks really well. So yeah, and what Nick said was about like playing super aggressive and devolving TSM to play their own style. Yeah, so the Marines played extremely well.
Yeah, so let's touch on what actually happened in game 1. So that was the game where Levi picked up the Kha'Zix, which I think is his best champion. And TSM, I think they had an interesting draft, but I actually do like it into what Marines like to play. So Marines in the group, they played a very aggressive style, and they played a style where they fought a lot early. And if you look at TSM's comp, they got a Rumble, they got a Jace, they have a Graves, and they have the Ashara. So they've got a lot of mid-game power. And theoretically, like, they spike in the mid game, and Marines is going to fight them in the mid game anyway. And because of their stronger, like, mid game champions, they should be able to win those team fights. But this is really like a story of Levi. So there was level 1 invade by TSM, and Levi just, like, he hits up all the Raptors except one, and he gets himself level 2. He skills the E, he jumps on Sven Skaren, and he kills Sven Skaren. And then TSM's strong point as a team is their solo laners, Hauntzer and Bjergsen, but they do play very aggressive in their lanes, they're very greedy, and Levi punished that extremely well. Like, he got the early kill on Hauntzer, and he got a kill onto Bjergsen very early on into the game, and, like, TSM's bot lane isn't their strong point, and so if you set their solo laners behind, you saw in that game that their bot lane isn't able to pick up the slack, and Turtle had overall a very, very poor series. Like, he got caught out a lot in the game, and into what Marines are playing, they play like a very aggressive style. It's hard to play ADC, especially the Ashe, the immobile ADC, and Turtle wasn't up to the task. Like, he just got caught out in so many team fights.
Yeah, like especially in that first and second game, the Ziggs, like playing the immobile AD carries into that. Like in the team fights coming into the mid game, like Ziggs ulti just came down and like half of World itself was already gone, and then he's got like Optimus, like playing on the Zed and the Levi and the Kha'Zix. Like he just seemed to. It was not a fun time for Turtle, and obviously he's an AD carry, which struggles with positioning already, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What were you gonna say? Sorry, Sol.
I really like going back to the draft. I really liked TSM's draft. Like it really showed that they're from the major region and they do their homework. And like Nick said, they have a really good mid game champions. But like Levi just pops off and get these kills and just snowballs the game. And yeah, it's going to be very interesting how Marines do in the actual MSI tournament, considering all the major region made it, and they'll be starting up on the wildcard team, because the wildcard teams, the major regions shouldn't really look down all these. Well, we don't call it wildcard teams, but it's but yeah, the GPL team, like even the Korean teams aren't gonna like not look down upon them, because like what happened at World, like Albert Snox beat both G2 and CLG, so yeah, going to be quite interesting.
They took down Rocks Tigers as well, didn't they?
Yeah. So yeah, it's going to be very interesting how the whole tournament's going to pan out.
Yeah. So let's when it comes into game 2, for this game for Marines, Levi gets the Kha'Zix again, and something about that I feel like teams should take notice with Marines is that Levi is aggressive to a fault. Like in this game, he passed up to Sven Skaren's blue buff, and there's like the moment of that he like realizes like neither of my mid and bot lane have shove pressure. I can win the 1v1 though. So he jumps onto Sven Skaren, he wins the 1v1, but he dies, and then Archie then Archie is also there and he dies as well. And so when you come to Levi, like he's aggressive to a fault, and there was some, and in that game, like he went for the invade, he kills Sven, but it was a 1-for-2 trade. But the thing that I think is really funny about that was that Levi, he dies and he loses his buffs. And then most junglers Solura were both junglers. Like when you lose your double buffs very early on to the game, like it's a bit, especially in a competitive game, it's like it's very hard to sort of come back mentally, and make towards making the next play. And Levi he makes a beeline straight to mid, and he gets the double buff back from Bjergsen. It's just like, okay, this is just the way
where
that
else are you
Levi
gonna get
plays.
them?
Yeah, this is just a walking buff. And then there's another time Levi's trying to 1v1 Sven Skaren in the Raptors. Neither top and mid have pressure, and he just jumps in anyway, and he dies. So I think that Levi, like, he plays very aggressive, and he's very entertaining to watch because he just makes things happen, but he's mechanically very good, but he has, like, no respect for side lane pressure at all, and I think that's something that other teams should go and look towards. something about this game as well was like Turtle. Like it happened in 2 times. TSM like make the right proactive like macro play. So like they rotate their 3-man to top lane, and then and so they take the first blood tower top lane. Biofrost recalls, and Turtles in this case where 3 of his members are top lane, his support has backed, and he just decides to keep farming bot, and then he realizes, like, a bit late, like, oh crap, they're gonna rotate and kill me, so he walks back, and then, Optimus, like, is just there on the Z, kills him, and it's just a thing of, like, TSM won NA, a major region, and that's a play that you'd expect, quite honestly, from, like, a low-level OPL team to, like, an OCS team of, like, the ADC not understanding that, you know, his people are top side, I'm bot side, the only play they can make is kill me, so I should just back off and, you know, farm mid or whatever. And he doesn't do that, and that shows, like, really, really bad things from TSM, that, like, one of their players does not understand such a fundamental part of the game. Of just, you know, when people are on your side of the map, you have to play more passively, and he just kept farming and he died.
Yeah, it's just selfish.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess we've talked a little bit about the Marines now, like their mid jungle synergy and like this incredible aggression that comes out. You know, they're getting jungle ahead, getting mid ahead, transitioning it. So we see why Marines do well in games 1, 2, and then, you know, later on what'll go well for them in games 4 and 5. I guess the last question I have for you guys is what allows TSM to come back in this game? In this series, sorry. What means that they win?
Just mental fortitude, I guess, and just reset their mentality, and they just didn't back down. Like, I believe their coach told them, hey, this is how they play, and drafted accordingly. And yeah, and Svenskeren gets like just comebacks in game 3 and 4. So big props to Svenskeren, because he had a very poor game 1 and 2, but in game 3 and 4 and 5, he played extremely well. Yeah. But then again, like in game 4, I think Marines should have Baron instead of went for the finish. But yeah, I think Marines would have actually 3-1 TSM. But yeah,
so crazy.
Yeah.
I think so the adaptation from TSM was the Ezreal in the game 3, and I think that was like that's smart from TSM's coaching staff. Of Turtle is getting like destroyed. His positioning is just bad this series. We can't change that. Let's just put him on a safer ADC in the Ezreal, and they banned away the Ziggs. And they picked away the Karma, because what Marines were doing is that they play very focused around the mid and jungle and not too much about their top and bot, and they just sort of got rid of like these very easy to play bot lane matchups in Ziggs and Karma, where you just like queue the wave. And so they banned the Ziggs, they picked the Karma, and they get like this priority back in the bot lane. And again, I talked about this before, and this is Levi plays aggressive to a fault. In this game, he goes for the gank level 3 on bot lane, and he just gets turned on and he gets killed. And then from there, like he's behind, he's dead. Svenskeren makes the right play and he dives the Zillion. Like this is Marines played the Zillion into Syndra counterpick successfully early on, and what that matchup is like is obviously there's the interaction of, you know, when Syndra ults someone, Zillion ult can bring it back, but Syndra is still like a very lane dominant champion, ultimate aside, and Zillion is pretty weak in the laning phase. So especially in the early levels. So what they did when they played it successfully, Marines, is that they got a lot of pressure towards the mid lane and sort of offset the deficit of Zillion. But Levi died very early on. Svenskeren dives the mid lane, and then Haunter just starts solo killing Stark. I think he got like 4 solo kills on the Gragas into the Renekton, and TSM won the game very easily on like they had 3 winning lanes at like very early onto the game, and they had quite a safe comp. And TSM like gained the control of the map, and they took a Baron, and they just ended the game very quickly off that.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Haunter had an incredible series, right?
Incredible.
Like
game 3, 4, 5.
Yeah, game 3. Yeah, particularly that game 5, like the over Flame Horizon, and you know TSM looking to get down that top tower really early on, by you know using a lot of this pressure that Haunter was having, and you know whilst Marines looking to 5-man bottom, TSM's just like, all right, we'll take. Sorry about that, guys. Had a wee technical difficulties. Had to restart the recording. So we were basically just talking about the final game for. For the final point, which was to be made on the Marines versus TSM. So we're about to move on to the Flash Wolves versus Supermassive series. So for me, this is going to be a pretty easy series to comment on, right? Like, Flash Wolves just destroyed them in laning phases and skirmishing across the map. Casa just completely ran over what's his name?
Stormage.
I forgot what the jungle is called. Stormage, that's the one. Yeah, just completely ran over him, and then they just transitioned those leads all around the map. Like they just got completely outclassed, in my opinion. Do you guys have any different thoughts on that?
I actually thought Supermassive would do relatively fine against a Flash Wolf, but it just showed that Flash Wolves are just on like maybe even 2 levels above Supermassive right now, because Flash Wolf just played flawlessly. Their micro and their macro was just on point, and yeah, like Flash Wolf going into the main event, definitely going to be a real contender to win the whole MSI.
I think the thing about this game showed like the really good prep from Flash was in the games that they won, Xenot's KDA was 26 kills, 2 deaths, and 22 assists. So he was very integral in their games. And what Flash Wolves did to counteract that was they just picked lots of CC in the bottom lane, and they just camped Xenot like something chronic. Like they had the Malzahar pick, they had the CC support, they had the Zara. And Cast was very focused around killing Xenot, and in this series Xenot went 1-13-3, so there's like a very big disconnect from Xenot versus Flash Wars and Xenot in the play-ins. Like, it was very much Flash Wars watched the games and said Supermassive win through their ADC, and they win through him pushing in the waves and then taking the tower, and they rotate around the map, and Flash Wars just said, alright, the way we're going to counteract that is just kill him, and they killed him a lot.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, not really a whole lot else to say on that series. So we'll move on to the main event. So the main event hasn't actually happened yet. So we're going to be doing some predictions for what our expectations are coming into...
Shouldn't we talk about Gambit? Marines versus...
I completely missed the series. Thanks for reminding me. So the Marines... they're Supermassive. So this one was actually played this morning. I was actually very excited to watch the series, which is probably one of the first series like in the play-in part of the tournament, which I was like excited going into. Like, I thought TSM was going to be a 3-0. Like, I was excited after it happened, but I was actually genuinely excited coming into this one. So I felt like Supermassive were, you know how Sol mentioned before, like Flash Wolves are like 2 levels above Supermassive. I felt like the Marines were kind of like a level above Supermassive, so like below Flash Wolves, and that aggressive style that they played, it seemed Supermassive really seemed to struggle in the skirmishing in the early game. Would you guys agree with that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Like, I'd like to touch on what Nick said before. Like, the Marines skirmish and devolves the team around their play style. So I think Supermassive's macro is a lot better than Marines, but it's just Marines' micro and their skirmish ability is just so much better than Supermassive. Because watching Supermassive, it's very slow and methodical. They play through their bot side, then they get their jungler in mid ahead, then they get their bot tower down, then they rotate their bot laners to the other lane, then that's how win their game. But when the things don't go according to Supermassive plan, Marines just attack, and just non-stop aggression coming from Marines. And I believe even in game 1, the game ended in very, very quickly, and Marines had like double shield comp, which is a very strange comp, like playing Jhin. And yeah, like I think Supermassive draft was like really good, but it's really the result that matters, right? Like, hey, you lost, so maybe the draft was wrong. But for me, I think Supermassive draft was really good, but they just got outclassed when it comes to skirmishing.
Yeah, I mean, in that game, there were So we touched on Supermassive style of they play through their bot lane, and then they got like an ADC that they like playing in the Ashe, and then Marines just respond to that by 2v2 killing them. Then Optimate solo kills mid at level 5, and Levi's running around killing people, and you like Supermassive style of like playing through a bot, playing through solo. Marines just responded that by solo killing them in the lanes, and that's not a very reliable strategy, but hey, when you're that much better than them individually, it definitely works out. And as Sol said, like, even though they had like a bit of a strange draft, like their draft with a double shield comp is more reminiscent of like a team that plays slowly, and they want to play like an extended team fight, and then but Marines sort of play team fights like they just burst someone. So it's like I think it was a poor draft when you think of it like the team stylistically, but ultimately drafts don't matter a whole lot when your mid solo killing, your bot solo killing, and your junglers running around on a very accelerated graze with lots of shields.
Yeah, like
Oh yeah,
the attack speed and the shield doesn't really help the Jhin, because what Jhin wants to do is like, hey, I'm just going to shoot at the back, but you got the Graves, so he's the AD carry now, right? So you funnel all the shield, the speed boost onto Levi, and he's just going to destroy everyone. And that's what happened in game 1. So it was very entertaining to see them putting laner's resource into the jungler, whereas normally it's jungler established for the laners. So yeah, it was very entertaining to watch how Levi played, and yeah, he just popped off.
Oh yeah, he just walked all over Stomach in the series. Like the difference between those two players was it was huge. Like we saw Stomach struggling like a little bit in the group stage, but it didn't really matter because of the caliber of the opponents they're against. But Levi just walked all over him. Well, I guess the one game which Supermassive did win before we move on to the main event. What went right for Supermassive in this game? Was the Ivan pick a big part of it?
Yeah, definitely. Like the Ivan kind of neutralized Ivan gets to choose the aggression instead of like the whole Lee Sin, Elise, Kha'Zix, Graves, because Ivan, he just wants to take the camp and just run and play around the mid game. Levi want to fight, but the Ivan just queues or just runs away. So Ivan's going to be a very good pick into Levi, and I believe the Marines just banded next few games.
Yeah.
So good adaptation from Supermassive coming into game 2, but Marines changed a bit of their drafting strategy and yeah, played it really well. So I agree the Ivan pick was good, but it just wasn't enough because that's the whole point of the pick ban, right? In the best of 5 series, like the adaptation.
The thing about this draft that I think the draft from Supermassive was good. It was similar to the draft from TSM in the first game against Marines, where they had the Jace, they had the Rumble, and they had this like strong mid game presence against Marines, where they're just gonna fight you mid game. And that game, like Marines got some advantages in the early game, like Z-Not was like 0-2 very early onto the game, but like if you fight a Jace in a Rumble mid game, you're gonna have a bad time, and Marines did have a bad time in those mid game team fights, and like Marines they just fight all the time. They don't really have a whole lot of finesse to their play, and if you're playing against a mid game comp, you need to have more finesse so you can get towards the late game and scale. And it showed they had no finesse, and they just like kept brute forcing, and they lost. Like Fabulous isn't he's not the star player of Supermassive, but his Rumble was very effective, and it was enabled a lot by by Marines just like running into mid game fights and letting him get a very good equalizer off.
Right. Okay, so I guess that probably like sums up that series. Like we thought the Marines were like significantly better individually, and the skirmishing style the Supermassive team really struggled with. So yeah, I guess unless either of you have anything you want to say, can we move on to the main event?
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on to the main event, what I'm going to want to get from you guys is a prediction on the rankings of the teams. So starting off with which team you guys think is going to finish first in the tournament in the group phase, and down towards last. And I want to know why SKT. Sorry, why the team that you choose is gonna win. Sorry, that's spoilers. So we'll start off with Sol. We'll do your rankings, then we'll do Nick.
Yeah, so it'll be very bold to make if you don't put SKT first. So yeah, SKT is just gonna win the whole thing. I do follow like the Chinese. I did watch the Chinese finals, but the World Elite, they weren't that impressive because in game 2 and 3 they were actually behind majority of the time, and they just do the miraculous team fighting, and they just won the game through that. But like teams like SKT and Flash Wolf, they're not going to give you like those breathing space, and they're just going to punish you instantly. So it's a toss up between SKT and Flash Wolf, but it's really hard to bet against SKT at the moment, given that they just 3-0'd who we thought second best team in the world, KT Rolster.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So yeah, SKT's first. I think you're delusional if you don't pick SKT first. Flash Wolves is my second. They have the team Flash Wolves have done very well internationally, and they've got an upgrade in the ADC Betty. And so I think that enables them a lot more because the ADC NL was like a weak point for them, but Betty is a lot better, and Carcer and Maple are still very dominant. And the way that they beat Supermassive was really, really, really clean, and it showed this like right mix of aggression and macro play. Like they, as soon as they had their ultimates up, they'd make a very strong play on an objective. They take the objective. When their ultimates are down, everyone understands they need to play passively until their ultimates are up. Their ultimates are up, play aggressively. So I think Flash Wolves are going to be second. I think and then from there, it's like interesting because TSM had an atrocious series against Marines. G2 always chokes internationally, and WE is like the style of we're just gonna lose early game but win mid to late game team fights. So I think that from like previous international experience, I'm gonna have to put WE third. I think that it's gonna be WE third, G2 fourth, TSM fifth, and Marines sixth. I wouldn't be too surprised if Marines pick up a few games, because you have to understand that the first round of MSI is best of ones. Marines play this like bizarre aggressive style that's going to catch off a lot of teams off guard. And if Levi gets a few ganks off in the early game and then it's not snowballing, it is a very good chance that they're going to be able to take out the game. And in a best of one scenario, that's just like all the more likely. I think that G2 is better than TSM given the Marines series, and I think that W vs G2 is going to be a very, very close, interesting series. But just because G2 has just been so poor internationally, I'm going to have to back WE on that one.
I guess I didn't do my ranking, but yeah, I'll just go run it down. SKT, Flash Wolf, then I think TSM, I think G2, then Gigabyte Marine, and then WE. I don't know.
Put WE sixth.
Wait, you're putting W in sixth?
I'm gonna go a bit of a bold prediction, but like WE has this really slow play style, but Gigabyte Marine on the other hand, like they have this really aggressive style. I believe in the because I believe it's double round robins in the group stage, so I think Gigabyte Marines can make a huge upset. Possibly, I think they can even walk away with like fourth or third even. But I think TSM like learned the lesson. I think even the 5 different teams here, like maybe even World Elite, can look at the TSM game and learn from their mistake. But I think the Gigabit Marine's gonna do quite well in this tournament, and I think G2 is gonna have a bit of a rough tournament, but yeah, I still believe. Like I've been following Europe for a very long time. I think this time they can actually really turn up, but I think TSM is going to be a very strong team overall.
Oh wow, that is a bold prediction. Really, TSM in third?
Yeah, I think the thing about TSM is they play really, really well around Horncer. Like, I still think TSM is going to finish 5th, because I think their bot lane, Wild Turtle specifically, is very weak, and I think that's Fen scaring when not on Lee Sin and Ivan is also very underwhelming. But if the way that they play around Haunster is really, really really good. Like when Haunts is on a carry champion like the Camille or Renekton, they always give him a lot of resources and they make sure he can play very aggressive. But I think what's going to happen to TSM is that teams are going to play very aggressive against them. Their bot lane's going to die. I think that teams are going to start taking away the Lee Sin, taking away the Ivan from Sven, and his performance is going to drop. And teams are just going to be playing really focused around making sure that Haunster and Buexen can't get ahead, and if they don't, TSM's falls apart, and we saw that in the Marine series. But yeah, if there's upsets, like it's gonna be, I wouldn't be too surprised, as Sol said, if Marine's upset. Like their style is very good to upset teams, and they showed, you know, in TSM they upset them twice in a row. So it's gonna be a very interesting tournament.
Yeah.
Yeah, SKT aside. Oh yeah, I was very surprised with those predictions. For my predictions, I would have to go SKT, Flash Wolves, World Elite, G2, TSM, and then Marines. I think the upset potential really comes in with the Marines. Like that team, like Nick said before, just so aggressive, so much of chance of taking away teams. Like, you know, from SKT, like taking games from SKT and Flash Wolves, sure, that's a really tough ask, because those teams seem to be coming to this tournament really clean. But like, particularly like TSM, G2, like those teams like looking a little bit messier. Maybe some good chance of some upset there. Okay, so moving into the top four obviously go into a single elimination. Are there any teams that could take this from SKT? Is there a team which can be the dark horse and upset?
Flash Wolves. I think everyone's gonna have to say Flash Wolves, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
In a best of 5 format, no other team other than Flash Wolves, I think, can actually consistently play well enough. Like SKT is very, very strong, but if in a best of 5, like they're gonna be able to adapt versus any other team. It's only Flash Wolves that I think can actually, you know, potentially take a series, but even then, I don't think it's particularly high percentage. Like SKT just play so clean, and as soon as they get an advantage, they play extremely well, and they have very strong players. Like you have Faker, you have Bang, and so even if they fall behind, like a 5k gold advantage doesn't mean as much versus SKT, because in a team fight, like their players are so good that 5k advantage isn't as much as you'd expect, and if they get that 5k advantage, you might as well just FF.
Yeah. No one, in my opinion, because like maybe in a best of 1, people can make a surprise upset, like last year MSI, SKT narrowly finished 4th, but in a best of 5 series, I don't see SKT actually losing series, and it'll be very surprising for them to not win this tournament. So yeah, like in a best 1 series, I think like anyone can take game off anyone, because like the level 1 at the moment is just so crucial. Like if there's any like a level 1 snowballing, as you saw in the Marines versus TSM, like if TSM did manage to get like the whole Raptor camp and put Levi behind, that it would have been a completely different story. So like I expect a lot of the teams to play really, really bizarre stuff at level 1. So if there's a chance to beat SKT in a best of 1, do something crazy at level 1. This could be like a secret strategy, but I think against SKT, I think you send your top laner and the support and ADC mid when the mid wave crashes. The reason is because the bot wave and the top wave doesn't crash at the same time as mid wave, so you want to get this cheesy thing going, and there's a window of opportunity for the bot lane and the top lane to actually gank mid laner, and you could go for like a 4v1. So yeah, here's an advice to if there's any team. So it's
So your
crazy,
solution,
like,
your solution to beat SKT is 5-man level 1 mid.
not 5 men. Your jungler just do your jungle stuff.
Wait, so your jungler's not the one ganking.
Wait, so
No.
Everybody but the
Sol,
jungler.
make a tweet after the show, Soul Strike's tips and tricks, and then at all the teams other than SKT.
Yeah. We'll see it from every team. And then SKT doesn't win the tournament. Everybody thinks Soul Strikes becomes the new SKT coach. Easy peasy. Wow, that is it's two insane predictions. First of all, TSM third, and now the prediction on how to beat SKT. Okay, so all of us have predicted SKT to win this tournament pretty clearly. I'm not sure if there's really any questions I've left to ask now, other than, ones that we'll probably have after the games get played. Is there anything you guys would like to say going into this tournament? Is there anything you'd want to add on to the conversation before we wrap this up?
I really want the Marines to do well, to show, like the wildcard team. Well, we don't call it wildcard team, but I still call them the wildcard team. They get between like the 8 minor region, the wildcard teams, compared to like NA, EU, and the gap has shrunk, but the gap between like the Korea and the rest of the team, definitely the gap is not closing anytime soon. So especially the MSI, because this is like one of the tournament where the international teams come together into one whole tournament, and to see how each region plays it out. So yeah, I just hope the Marines play well in this tournament. Maybe in the top 4.
I don't really have anything else to add.
Okay, I mean, for me, it's that I really hope that as an SKT fan, it'd be nice to see SKT not drop a single game and not lose anything, So I'm sure everyone else in the world would love to see that as well. So I'm sure they're behind me when I say that. Okay, so we'll wrap the show up there. Thank you, everybody, for watching. If you are still watching, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. I'll be putting out more content. Should have some big surprises for the Oceanic fans coming into Split 2. So stay tuned for that. But yeah, I think can finish that one up there. Thanks, everybody, for watching.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Oh, yeah, and thanks for coming on the show. Yeah.